No, thank you, Mr. Schnyderite. So I want to welcome everyone tonight and thank you all for coming. And I want to thank everyone for some really great responses on the RSVP form. Honestly, Mr. Schnyderite and I think we said this last month, again, there are always things to talk about related to, the everything that's going on with the pandemic and the various models and things. And some of tonight is that, some of tonight is some other things. But I did want to let everyone know, and I'm sure you saw on the agenda, it's a pretty big agenda. It's bigger than we're used to. Usually we're used to covering one or two items and just kind of talking about them. We have a number of things that it seemed like there were parents seeking clarity on and seeking some information on. So a couple of the items are really just us trying to share some information or maybe explain some things that have been out there in relation to that. So we have kind of our topics that we had in mind as the bread for the sandwich of the meeting. And so Mr. Schnyderite's going to open up the first one. We're going to talk a little bit about standards-based reporting, which is something that right now both elementary schools are going to begin the process of exploring. And so, Mr. Schnyderite, if you're ready, you can kind of kick that off.
Thanks, Mr. Pyne. It only works when I don't want it to. Okay, so we just wanted to inform everybody. We've had a lot of conversations over the last 2 years, and to try to sum some of them up. A lot of times when parents are looking at the challenges or the struggles that they're seeing with their child or their successes they're facing, they're basically comparing grades. We've heard, oh, my child was an A student last year and there's a B student this year, or vice versa. I would like to say that what makes an A student and what makes a B student, what does that mean? Right? When we do that, it's very subjective. Both Mr. Pyne and I spent a lot of time at the secondary level. And, the analogy I always like to give, because obviously we have a lot of adults here today. You probably remember back, it's been a long time for me, but, it's like back to high school. And, a lot of times you were graded on participation. So what happens if you have Einstein in your class who knows everything, but isn't participating, and all of a sudden they're a C student? Well, but they know everything. Why are they getting a C? A standards-based report card, for those of you who are currently have your child in elementary school at Peters, in kindergarten, we're about to send home that second marking period report card, and that's a standards-based report card. Rather than a student receiving an A, B, C, D, or F with comments, they basically have the standards on there. Can count to 100. Can blend words successfully. And based on that, the responses by the teacher are based on what they should be able to do and what they are actually doing. Does that mean they're A's or B's or C's or D's or F's? At this level, what's more important, that they're an A or a B or a C student, or is it more important that you know exactly what they can do based on our state standards? So what we're doing, this has been something that's been supported by the teachers, because I think it gives accurate data to the parents and makes that conversation easier with teachers, because I know how many times have we had discussions in small groups or individually, and you said, it's like, I just want to know what my child knows and doesn't know, right? A C or a B or an A doesn't tell you that. But if we're able to basically on that report card report to you exactly what we're seeing, I think that was better information for a parent, and also gives us an accurate way of communicating to you what the challenges are and what the successes are. So are we doing this? This is the very beginning of that conversation. So we're not really at the point today of discussing that, but we wanted to sort of just wet your whistle, so to say, to make you aware that that's something that, again, has had some support, and what we're sort of planning to do at the building level. Both Mr. Pyne and I are going to be creating grade level teams and building level teams to discuss this and look at the positives and negatives. And what we'd hope to do is bring it back to you as the family engagement meeting at a future time, when we have, because right now we're going to be reviewing report card templates. Because if you've never seen one, you might be What does that look like? What does that mean? What if my child's in 3rd grade or 6th grade or 1st grade? What would that look like for them? So we hope that, just to basically give you the idea that we're looking at this. And I know Mr. Pyne's going to give you a little analogy to sort of sum it up. That'll give you an idea of the premise behind it. But again, the idea is it gives you as a parent accurate data about what the child is actually doing rather than B plus or above level. What does that mean? And allows us as the educational entity to basically do a better job communicating to you successes and struggles so that, we can begin that conversation and have that conversation on a more in-depth level. So, Mr. Pyne, I guess if you want to, I'm not sure if you feel anything needs to be added there, but you can go with your amazing analogy.
So I am very excited about this, and I'm glad Mrs. Lafferty is here. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously grades and report cards are meant to be communication. I just think the 2 bedrocks of any improvement are going to be communication and measurement. And you want to measure what you value. You want to value what you measure. And I think that's really what we're looking to do. And I'm just trying to look for the tab on here because I did just open it. And now it looks like it's missing. Just give me 1 second on this. I'm going to re-click this.
I can share if you like, Mr. Pyne.
Could you? That'd be great. And if you just hit the Zoom button once, otherwise it's a little bit difficult to see. So I've given credit to Ms. Lafferty here, and I should give credit as well. And I used their exact document. My daughters go to Northampton School District. And when we first started, we were talking about this a little bit a couple of years ago. And she brought me in this whole folder of what were their materials when they were really sort of around this stage, the planning stage and some of the beginning conversations. And so I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit on that top piece there, Mr. Schnyderite. So if we're looking at students and we're looking at learning, we're looking at a really complex thing and something that's really difficult to boil down to a number or a letter if we're actually going to meaningfully try to make change and identify where help is needed. And so I love this analogy that Northampton School District used of if your doctor gave you an 88 for your health, right, or a 66 for your health, that doesn't tell you much. I mean, that's pretty useless information. If your doctor tells you that your blood pressure is high, that now allows for that prognosis to lead to a treatment plan, right? And that allows for more meaningful work to be done in figuring out what it is that students need. And so, I mean, I like this chart because you look at it and you immediately might start relating certain things to being healthy, but then you might look at other things like exercise levels or calorie consumption or blood pressure, and you start to see that it's going to be really difficult to assign a grade to these people, right? And so if you just scroll down a little bit, Mr. Schnyderite, this is what a grading system looks like in the average school that's running an average grading system. We have test averages, we have quiz averages, we have class participation averages. I mean, I guess in some ways this tells you whether or not a student participates well at 20% value. Whether or not they do homework, I mean, it tells you a lot of things, but it's not going to tell you what, and I'm going to ask you, Ms. Schneider, to scroll down one more time. It doesn't tell you, and I know this isn't clear here now, and obviously part of our process is figuring out how to create clarity as we're trying to communicate these things, but this is actually more meaningful. So geometry attaches itself to a certain set of skills. And so if a student has a 2 in geometry, but has a 4 in other areas, then we can identify that is something that we need to work on. So this is kind of the background of why standards-based reporting is something that we think might create more value in what we do and sort of help us do that job better and help, when I say us, all of us, right? Help us communicate better as a school and as families in terms of what it is that really is missing and what is, a strength. So there are challenges with that. And one of the biggest challenges is it's not what we're used to. And so to be completely honest, the enlistment of parents in that communication process and taking this forward is what's going to really help so that as we work through this, that product achieves that goal. Because the goal here is not to change the piece of paper that you get 4 times a year. The goal here is to change the entire process of the way that we all work together in order to have kids learn better.
Thanks, Mr. Pyne. I'll tell you, if we had to grade your presentation, it would definitely be an A plus. But what does that tell us? We can sort of break that down based on volume and pitch and give you some more information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. So I'm not sure. I mean, again, we don't really, we're really not ready for a discussion because, again, we don't have anything to show you yet. We're at the very beginning, even within the schools of this discussion. But I'll tell you, I don't want to speak for all the teachers at Peters, and I'm sure Mr. Pyne doesn't want to speak for everybody because, you put 40, 50, 60 people in a room and they're never going to agree on anything. But I'll tell you that it's been very supportive here in Peters. Again, we already use it in kindergarten. So if your child is now in first, second, third, fourth, or fifth, sixth grade, and they went to kindergarten, you might want to take that out and take a look because, again, they didn't receive A, B, C, D, F or some percentage. They received, can they do this? Yes, or no, basically, or to what degree can they do it? And again, we hope that that if we look at this as the final product, it'll help us have that communication. Does anyone have just a general comment? Again, without needing to go into much depth, but if you'd like to, comment or give us an idea that you have as a parent, you're welcome to.
I think this is a fantastic idea. Partly, I can give a lot of examples with my kids, but my oldest, Adrian, is in 4th grade, and he gets a grade for, I believe it's ELA. Like, it doesn't include reading, but it's all the other parts of that. And he does well, but it's also usually one of his lower grades on his total report card. Now, during the parent-teacher conference, his teacher was able to clarify for me that in spelling, he has nearly 100%. And this is what is actually keeping that grade looking like it's a good grade. Like, he has a mid to high B. But in the grammar portion, he actually doesn't do so well. And if it was just the grammar, he has like a 72%. So, through the parent-teacher conference, I was able to get this information from his teacher, and then we were able to put a little bit more focus on the grammar because I don't realize that he's not really getting it because he's got a high B, so he must be getting it. So I really it's been very helpful for him the second marking period in that we've been able to, I've kind of put a little more emphasis into, hey, I see you have a grammar test tomorrow. Tell me what it's about. Tell me what you're learning so that we can figure out what he's missing. So I think this is it would be super helpful to see this breakdown in multiple subject areas.
Great. All right. Anybody else would like to chime in?
I saw that Ms. Mori had put in the comment a question about the rollout, and I know that we're still working on some of the finer details about that, but I know that you had spoken about that just earlier, so I'm going to let you handle that.
Sure. Obviously, this isn't the kind of thing that happens overnight or even in a slow rollout. But the idea is, again, we're right now forming our grade level teams, our building level teams, I should say. Again, there's been a lot of interest, at least at Peters. I don't want to speak for Mr. Pyne and the Sladen Elementary, but there's been a lot of interest. The idea is, between now and the end of the school year and into the beginning of next school year, we'll be looking at research, looking at templates. I've been able to acquire a template of every school within our IU who uses a standard-based report card, so we could take a look at what this could look like, right? And the hope is that at the beginning of next year, sometime before the new year, we'll basically make a decision about whether we feel this is the way to move forward and what it might look like. The rest of the year, one of the things that the teachers are going to have to do different is gather their data so they can accurately communicate it with you. So they're going to have to probably adjust what they do within the classroom, how they gather their assessments so that they can, again, if you're looking for specific things, you can't just give a general test and say 77. So, there's probably going to have to be some, examination of curriculum, give the teachers a chance to sort of prepare for this new way of gathering data. And I'll tell you, the kindergarten teachers right now are going through this because we're almost at the end of the second marking period, whereas a teacher in first and second grade who's been gathering data throughout the entire marking period really has to just sort of put it together and then formulate that grade. and I'm sure it's the same probably grades 3 through 6. The kindergarten teachers are doing assessments right now to see what the students know, to see, you know, how well they're blending, to see how well they're counting, to see their, you know, first sound fluency, so that we can report that accurately. So again, we're going to have to give the teachers time to do that. Ideally, the entire next year is a communication out to what this would look like, to involve the family engagement meetings and our wonderful parents who are always working with us to sort of show you early and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. Do you have any comments from your perspective? Because again, you know how Mr. Pyne and I roll. It's like, you know, the more we get everyone involved, the better it is. Because, you know, we're not dictators. We want to hear everybody's sort of voice in this, and then eventually a decision will be made. And the hope is that not next year, but the following school year, if it all goes well and we come to a decision, we'll be ready for those report cards then.
So that's kind of why I was asking. So obviously I have twin boys with Mr. Pyne right now at the elementary school. So, I mean, I agree with, I think it was Ms. Bender that said it. I think it's a great idea, you know, how exactly it looks or what exactly your categories are. Like, I think on the sample you had tests and quizzes being separate categories. I don't remember the exact numbers. I'm not a numbers person. And homework and participation all being separate categories and different weights. Obviously right now, with this year being what it is, some of those areas would be very different. So, I mean, I myself am a teacher in a CTE setting, and we do competency-based education. But with that, for me, you know, I teach photography and design. I'm always assessing my students on competencies, but a large part of what I have to assess is employability. So, you know, I can have a student that is off the charts with their computers or their designs or even photography, but they might not be employable, and they're not going to be able to hold down a job because they're difficult to get along with, or they don't show up on time, they're not good time management, or they're just miserable to work with. So for me, you know, 1/3 of our scores is just that employability factor. So, you know, turn that into an academic setting. You know, right now you're calling it participation, but you know, that really is something very important. And I can only assume, I don't know how it is in your academic setting, I assume right now that is a bit challenging for both virtually and hybrid to be able to try to get everybody in the classroom participating. So in this current setting, obviously, I'm sure there's different challenges that you guys are going to have to overcome. So that's why I was just curious to see what the rollout is. And I'm sure your teams will come up with other creative ways to make that participation work, whether it's, you know, those forums or assessments or exit tickets. I'm sure it can work, but that's why I was just curious to see, you know, exactly what you guys are looking at for, I guess, at the elementary school level, what, you know, if you're piloting it maybe, or for a couple teachers next year, or, you know, what your plan is in general. But I do think overall, I think it's a great idea. And if anybody's going to pull it off, you guys are definitely going to be able to do it well. So I was just curious.
Hey, you made 2 great points there, Nicole. First of all, you know, right now, obviously we can't change it this year, but imagine this year, I mean, you know, and think about it. We're parents here. We're sticklers for grades. You know, the report card comes, we want to know how our child did. This year, we're living through a pandemic. Imagine not having to worry about if they're a student or a B student, but hey, let's see what they know, right? It's a different way of thinking about it. And I'll tell you this comment, even though it's not addressing it immediately, you know, a lot of, I would say, you know, probably Mr. Pyne, every month somebody says, my child is an A student and now they're not getting A's. What do I do? Well, again, that means a lot of different things, right? You know, what does that mean, right? A to B, one got worse. Well, you know, we use the analogy when you're looking at data, you know, well, A to B might not be worse. Maybe somebody's just looking at it differently. And maybe, you know, you would have been a C with this teacher, but they gave you an A, and then this new teacher would give you a C, but now they give you a B. It's like, so you know, there's a lot of subjectivity in there. Again, if we look at our standards, they can do this, they can do that. Here's what they know, and here's what they're missing, and then we can work on addressing those. And I think Mr. Pyne said it well with here's the prescription. Now let's find here's the diagnosis. Let's now find the prescription to make it better. So. And
just real quick on that sample you showed, well, away from the top of being the weight and the cholesterol and stuff, but looking at that bottom level being, you know, how it's broken up and the different things that are determining that overall numeric grade. And then at the bottom, that would really be linked back to those standards. So obviously, you know, student A was really great at that problem solving, but obviously the geometry, they're obviously having some spatial and depth issues, or, you know, maybe they were not good at geometry and that, you know, that other issue. So it's going to have some kind of standards of what they covered in that time period or marking period. Am I understanding the gist of it correctly?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a great plan. So whatever degree it does pull out, or whatever it looks like in the end. So I think it sounds good from this parent's point of view.
Great. Well,
Better picture assessment.
I appreciate that. I saw Allison. Did you still have anything to say, Mrs. Crucial?
Yeah, I just had a question. I think I'm not opposed to this, but when would you look to transfer that over to some sort of grading scale? Because come secondary level, middle school in particularly, where it will transition at some point to grades. And although a standard-based system might, if a kid's average or below level, whatever you guys are going to equate that to, you might be able to say that's an average C. But how will you make sure that transition and that students and parents kind of are aware where their kid lies by grade, so that when they get into the other setting, they're not shell-shocked because they thought they were there, but,
So I can answer that. And my answer is going to be, that's a good question. And again, that's the process of the next year and a half. Is that question, honestly, also, Ms. Maury's question there about, we're used to also attaching it to those, you might call like hireable characteristics, we might call them essential skills. Like, we're used to also addressing those things as a school. And that question is going to come up from parents and teachers. Like, how are you addressing things like developing good study habits, or like, responsibility and things like that? That happens sometimes. I mean, sometimes in a standards-based report card, there'll be places to address that. To your question, sometimes there's a transition. I mean, and especially as you move from the elementary to the secondary, there's a grade level at which you start deciding to pair those standards with some sort of leveled out, tiered system of grading. It's a good question. It's definitely one of those questions that, and when we talk to Dr. Stoker about this, I mean, we want to look to the secondary program to see how do we transition this when we get there. And my building's probably the answer, somewhere, whether it be 5th or 6th grade, we start to look at how do we sort of ease forward while still realizing, like, we think standards is the key, but that we also recognize that there's a value shift that's about to occur and they should be ready for that.
And in reviewing, Allison, again, we've got examples and templates of how different schools do it. So that certainly would be a conversation. I mean, before we had the conversation at Curriculum Council today, I reached out to Jill and just said, hey, Jill, just let you know, so in case you get some questions, because I know, the secondary right now is looking at, sort of revamping how they're doing things with their grades. You're right. There has to be a transition there somewhere. We don't know that answer right now, but again, we've got a lot of great templates and models. And, obviously, if you want to be involved in that discussion, I mean, that'd be a great person, to have involved, the high school guidance counselor or school counselor, who sees the end product, because, you're right. You can't just sort of, all right, it's all standards based and boom, here's your grade. There has to be meaning in there, and the transition there is important. What great dialogue, everyone. Thank you. So moving on, the next one is really just sort of, I guess, a brief statement. In every meeting, we always have people that want to discuss sort of our models and get an update. And, sort of the questions have come up recently. How do we figure out as a district when we're going back, right? What does that look like, and how do we determine that, right? So I had a discussion with Mr. Link today, because as you know, and I'll talk a little bit about the attestation agreement, but, basically he in our discussion, he let us know that, we're going to continue to monitor the positive cases, every 5 to 10 days. And the idea is right now we're back in the hybrid. The reason we went to the hybrid in the first place, I wasn't part of the discussions, nor was Mr. Pyne, but I believe, there were health department, we have, contacts with our local health department that, we passed on and said, hey, is this the right thing to do to sort of give that holiday a time to sort of see where the numbers are and give people a chance to sort of be at home and not come to school. Obviously today was our first day back. And again, I know Katya's kids had a great day. Hopefully everybody who came back today had a great day. And, Thursday and Friday, for our B group, we're looking forward to it. for the time being, they're going to continue monitoring every 5 or 10 days to determine if there's a need to go to the fully remote for any reason. Now, keep in mind, we did as a district sign that attestation agreement. The idea of that is because we are considered substantial rate of spread, that in order to be open at all, we had, Mr. Lincoln, Mr. Fedorcha, basically sign this agreement as the superintendent and the Board of Ed, president, to basically state that we are going to be following all the guidelines and doing our due diligence as a school. As you know, Mr. Link, anytime there's a case within the school, he reports it out within the day and sort of shares it with everybody. So it's basically right now we're in that review and sort of oversight model. We're mandated to follow those requirements of the attestation agreement for a small school, and all the steps that Mr. Link has been taking to communicate afterwards. We're hopeful, and this was, sort of his words to me, we're hopeful that we can continue in this model and not have to go back to the remote model. The challenge for Mr. Pyne and I were even talking about it today. What happens if we're in this hybrid and then we've got to close, and then we're hybrid, we got to close. We got to, consistency is important. And even though the consistency of the 5-day model for parents was a challenge, the consistency was there. Hopefully we're able to stay consistent in this model and then continue to sort of re-examine, what's going on in the world, in the hopes of eventually a safe return for students in that 4 or 5-day model. We're not ready to, as he said to me today, we're not ready to make that decision yet. And we'll continue to monitor positive cases, rollouts of the vaccine, the ability to maintain social distance with increased numbers in the schools to see how that works. And just to share, and there's really nothing I can say other than, somebody said, oh, there's other schools that are rolling out already. How do we go about doing it? Now, it's hard for us to speak for other schools. I'm not sure what makes, to be honest, I can't speak for anybody other than myself. So, I don't want to speak for our board members and why they're making decisions, or our superintendent, why he makes his decision. And I certainly can't do it for other school districts. But, the best thing I've got is that, Mr. Link is our superintendent. I put my trust behind him, and that I think we're making the best decisions for safety, and we'll continue to monitor as we go. Just so you know, and I believe Mr. Pyne might have put it in the agenda. If not, we can certainly share it out. On our website is that attestation agreement. It's not the 66-page, safety plan. It's 2 pages. I was like, oh, I should probably read this before discussing it today and reread it. And I couldn't remember if it was like an 18-page document. I was like, 2 pages. I was like, thank goodness. So you can certainly review there. And again, we'll keep communicating and keeping everyone informed. Now, our next point is Mr. Pyne and technology. Mr. Technology.
Real quick before you do that, the agenda that I have it in, I don't know, I think it was shared out through email. Are you okay if I share the link for that? Because I put a number of links in there. If anyone has any questions about the attestation agreement or like what we were agreeing to in that, and again, the alternative to agreeing to it was going fully virtual. So it was either agree to these sort of set of health standards. So if you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and I'll copy that link. I'll put it in the chat, and then you guys will be able to actually just see in the agenda the links in there. If you want to look at any of those documents, and actually also there are some links in there related to what I'm about to talk about now. So we had a question. I just looked through. I don't think Ms. Artanyan's in here. The mom who had asked about it. And I actually had this question come up once earlier this year. And so as soon as I saw it on there, I was like, well, this is a good time. We should definitely talk about this because I don't want there to be misperceptions out there. We had 2 technology related questions. So we spoke with Mr. Hill today. One of them is related to light speed. So as you may know, since we've gone, into this whole pandemic situation and we've had students working from home, we've purchased a product called Lightspeed. Lightspeed is basically an add-on for Google Chrome. And what it does is when students are logged into their student account with the school, it allows the teacher to see and monitor what they're doing. So that serves both security and safety purposes as well as instructional purposes. But it certainly does mean that the teacher is able to do that. Now, the concern has come up because we've had families who are using personal devices at home for their students to complete their virtual or their hybrid learning when they're remote. And so now I've had a couple of parents who have asked, well, does that mean that the school district is able to tap into my computer, right? That they're able to access what's on my computer. And so I thought it was a good time to maybe kind of be clear about exactly what it does and what it doesn't do. So it operates exclusively in Google Chrome. And again, it provides that immediate access. I'm going to start by saying, as users of our accounts, students, when they're logged in on at-home devices, their activity is always eligible to be monitored. That's not only because of like we're looking for things, we're not, but that's for safety reasons. We have to have all kinds of filters in place and things like that. And in order to do that, if they're using anything that's affiliated with the school district, we have to monitor it. Of course, we also just do monitor it because it's good practice. So Lightspeed allows us to do it in the minute. We already have the ability and have the right and the responsibility to do that. Now, if the student logs off of their Google account, nothing can even be viewed on that Chrome, on that screen. So for those families who are choosing to use their personal devices rather than the Chromebook, that's really what I would say, is that if you're concerned, make sure when you're going on to Google Chrome that your child's account is logged off, and then nothing would be accessible. Now, I'm going to tell you, in the background of all that, we frankly don't care what you're doing. You know what I mean? The only time we would contact you is if we saw something that we were concerned your child was doing. So if you were logged in as them and doing something we would be concerned about, we contact you. You can blame it on them. So at the end of the day, please, we already were able to do that. This is not a new privacy issue. Lightspeed just allows that immediate interaction between the teacher and the student across those devices. The other point of advice is, if you're concerned about it, please take a school-issued Chromebook. You know what I mean? The reason we did all that is so that the students would have their own devices, so that they would always have access. So I'm going to reference two things in here, technology related, but both of them are in the acceptable use policy, which is an old policy. I mean, acceptable use policies have been around longer than I've been teaching. And they've always said this, because the federal government's always had schools responsible for regulating what they're giving students access to, basically, and keeping an eye on that. Now, we're not responsible for catching everything. So please know, we're not liable if for some reason they find a workaround, but we are always responsible for making efforts to try to make sure that students are safe when they're using technology and the internet. And that's really where this comes from. So yeah, the first policy, at the bottom of the accessible use policy, towards the end, it outlines all those federal regulations. And it sounds scary because it says privacy, search, and seizure. Which, again, this is not a school district's desire. We're not going out and finding things, but we have a responsibility to be that vehicle when we're handing minors this technology. So that was the first one that came up. I mean, honestly, there's nothing to discuss there. It's law and policy. It's long-standing law and policy. Lightspeed's just a tool that we're able to use in order to bridge the gap when students are at home and we're at school.
So I just have one question about that. So I use a Google phone, so it's automatically like everything is Google Chrome. I have, for my second grader and my fourth grader, their Google Classroom accounts on my phone so that I can monitor what they are doing. So does this mean that the school then theoretically has access to my cell phone and everything that I do on it, or like...
It's like I planted you. It's like I planted you in the audience to ask the right question, because I missed something there, which is that this does not extend beyond Google Chrome. So it's just like I have a bunch of Chrome add-ons at the top of my screen here that I use throughout the course of it. They don't have access to my computer. I don't have access to them through anything else. They only exist on this space that I'm on right now, and only if I'm logged in. So if I logged into my personal account, my personal Gmail account, all of this stuff wouldn't be there anymore because it's affiliated with my work account. So again, I mean, what I would say is Google Classroom, if you have a Google Classroom app, the answer is absolutely no, right? I mean, you're attached to that through an app. That's not even through Chrome. The only issue would be is if your child was using Chrome during the course of the day, which if they're using your home device, they would be during the school day. If they were using Chrome and then you came home and you went on and you were not logging them out, not logging in as yourself or anything like that, then the reality is that yes, the school does still have access. We're not using that access. We're not looking for things, but as long as they're logged on, we have a responsibility to continue to monitor that web behavior. Actually, again, Mrs. Rafferty here. So I keep mentioning Mrs. Rafferty because her husband is a principal at my daughter's school, at the middle school. And I remember a few years back, she had said something to me about my daughter on one of the school issued Chromebooks accessing something she wasn't supposed to access. They have a very rigorous monitoring process. Nothing terrible. It was like a comic book thing or something. It was like something goofy, but it was. I just thought it was funny. She came up and said that. The second thing that I do have to go over is, and I think this was Ms. Bender, YouTube. This has come up a lot. Parents asking, hey, can you limit YouTube? Can you stop YouTube? Can you make it go away? And the short answer is yes, we can get rid of YouTube. But the problem is that we use it for a lot of things across grade levels, and we can't get rid of it piecemeal. We can't take it away from a student. Basically, our filters can eliminate a resource altogether. But I'll also tell you that there's a process, and that's outlined in the policy as well, by which teachers or others can request access to something that is currently filtered or limited, and then the administration is required to review it and make a determination as to whether or not it serves an educational purpose, and we should then reintegrate it. And that's called, hold on, the Internet Filtering and CIPA Compliance law that supports that end of the policy. So that's boring, but there is a link in there for that whole policy that you could take a look at. On the back end of all this, so I want to say, whether you know it or not, in that stack of papers you get every year, you sign off on all these. I mean, you sign off that you acknowledge that these are good things, that these are things that we should be doing and stuff. I think it means something different this year, and that's why there's a little bit of concern. But our intent remains the same, which is that all of these policies and all of these safeguards are in place as safeguards, okay? So, yeah, unfortunately, I can't say, like, YouTube, it's there or not. I will tell you that in terms of us doing something about children on YouTube, Lightspeed's our best friend, because Lightspeed is actually the thing where I have teachers who are on there and they're like, hey, Todd, you're supposed to be in math class right now, and it pops up over the YouTube video and gets him off. And if he's not listening, the teacher can turn off YouTube for that student for a period of time. So again, it does offer us those opportunities at the teacher level, but at the district or school level, it's all or nothing. I mean, either we block the entire thing or we allow access to it and just continue to work at ways of policing it. So that's not a short answer, but that's as short an answer as I can give on those two questions.
Right. Like, I mean, the problem that our family has run into, and I know I've spoken to a lot of friends who have the same problem, is it's not so much what they're watching on YouTube. Like, they're watching kid appropriate things. The problem is, as soon as one of my 3 children has a break between classes, if I'm addressing something with a sibling or, God forbid, trying to like do laundry, they're on YouTube because they have like unlimited access to YouTube. So I basically spend a good portion of every virtual learning day handing out consequences for somebody logging onto YouTube. And like, it's just gotten to a point where I don't really know what else to do. I don't really want to put a burden on the teachers to be like, hey, can you please block my own kid from YouTube in between all of your like live streams? But it like, I don't know, maybe I just have too many kids.
And I understand that. I mean, that is one of those challenges I'm sure is coming up, right? Is just monitoring what kids are doing from one second to the next. I'll tell you, it's no different for us in the classroom. There's not a classroom I go in and observe where teachers are not circulating the room nonstop saying, knock it off, get off that. I mean, it is, that is the game.
Mr. Pyne, Christy wanted to add something to this, and she so politely waited patiently and posted in the chat. So, Christy, you can go ahead.
Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm on a different laptop. Thanks. With Lightspeed, just so you're aware, when a teacher signs up a class, they actually put the time of the class because Lightspeed is not unlimited. So we only have so much time in a day that we're allowed to use this Lightspeed account. So if my class is going to run for 40 minutes, I have the 40 minutes scheduled that I see those kids at that time. So even if you have those accounts logged in and you would go to use, Google Chrome, and your child happens to be logged in, if it's after school hours or they're not in that class, we don't even have access to that. Because I know sometimes, it might be a little nerve-wracking. Did I forget to log out? Plus the fact that we just don't even care. I mean, when we leave school, we're not looking to see, what the kids are on. And if we had time to just sit and, spy on people, that would be fabulous, but we just don't. But there is actual time. So if the kids are not with us in class, we can't. In fact, I was curious about one of my students the one day because I was hoping they would take a test during their other class when they had time. And I tried to check on them and I couldn't because they weren't part of my scheduled time.
Thanks, Christy. And to finish it up, for those who aren't tech savvy, I asked Mr. Hill, our technology director, was talking to Mr. Pyne and I today about this, and he said it in a way that I understood, and I'm not as tech savvy as many. He basically said, when you're on your own device, there's not like it's something is downloaded onto it that's going to be spying on you. It's basically all through Chrome. So when I thought about that, he's talking about acceptable use and this and that. My brain's going like, what does this mean? When he said it's basically, if you're on Chrome, it's there. If not, it's not like something was downloaded. However, I did ask him after that when I'm talking to Alexa, if like Russia or China are listening, and he was not able to confirm nor deny that. So I'm not sure what that means either. Our next topic is, I guess, Mr. Pyne, you're going to introduce this one, and then I'll jump in. It's talking about the meeting student needs.
Sure. Yeah. So we just had two sort of contrasting questions come up, or concerns. And again, I'm not going to pretend. I mean, they're concerns. They really are. And we kind of saved some of maybe the heavier stuff here towards the end. One of them was in relation to how we're meeting the needs of advanced learners, or what we might be able to offer for students who are advanced learners right now and are really breezing through this. Rare as they may be, at least in terms of what I've seen at Slatington so far. And then also, what are we doing for students who are struggling? And I'm not going to lie, honestly, right now in a time of crisis, there's a bit of a triage mode, and the students who are struggling, there's a lot of work being done there. There really is. And I know the teachers are putting they have things on their websites. If there's a concern that, you're looking for resources for your students to tap into and things like that, I would definitely reach out to the teacher about that beyond the things that they already sort of provide on the website. Our experience by and large is that just keeping moving forward is pretty, kids are having a struggle in general. For the struggling learners, our percentage, so we typically talk about any program in that tiered model that I know we've talked about in previous family engagement meetings, where, we think about 85% are pretty okay with anything, right? 85%, we just tell them what to do, they do it, everything's great. We give them the basic, reinforcement. 10% or so, like they need a little bit something extra. And then, that we get to that 5%, they need a lot extra, right? And so we try to look at our system in that way. And I'm not gonna lie, the entire pandemic has turned a lot of it upside down, and it's created a lot of needs that weren't there before that we're now trying to address because they're primary needs in order to get to the learning piece. So we still have, though, even within our schools, the tiered structure for academic supports. So students are getting tier 1 instruction through both in-person learning and virtual learning at home on the days that they're not in. But we're also using assessments and teacher recommendations in order to make determinations as to what additional supports might be needed. And actually, both Ms. Borger and Ms. Lafferty here are two of Slatington's intervention support staff. So I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, if you guys have anything else to say in terms of that, but we are. And then the other thing I would say, and I don't want to, this probably applies to both myself and Mr. Schnyderite, I think that there's an acknowledgement here that some of that work, much of that work is yet to come. Much of closing the gaps caused by distance is the next step of what we're going to be working on as we move forward and we move beyond this period of constant crisis.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Pyne. It's a great introduction there. Hey, I wanted to address the advanced learners. I know, Kristen, one of your things that you wrote in there, let me admit someone. Here we go. Was regarding what are we doing for advanced learners? Now, typically within our MTSS system, we have our reading teachers, pulling students that have specific needs and working with them as part of our tiered support system. In the past, as you probably know, Mrs. Fella, who was one of our specialists and our intervention coordinator, she would also create an enrichment group. I didn't, for anybody who's been a part of that before, who knew about that, that hasn't been forgotten. Just to give you a little context, it's been an interesting year through the pandemic because, Mrs. Fella, who is a beloved teacher at Peters Elementary, who we miss dearly, she retired. Many of you know, I think it was the first week of October, perhaps. It was right in October, and we did a wonderful search and were able to, find someone to take Edie's place. And we found that within. We're very fortunate. Amanda Bayshore, who was our learning support teacher, has now stepped in as that teacher. The challenge was when we did that, we had to find a replacement for her as a learning support teacher. And we found one outside of the district, and they didn't release that teacher right away. So again, great news. Missy Bowers, who was our new learning support teacher, who has had an amazing first month. She didn't start until, I think, December 14th. So there really wasn't, we were basically running intervention with just 2/3 of what we typically would within a pandemic. So at the beginning of the year, our focus was on, based on our beginning of the year data, was on the students who, with those achievement gaps. I actually had a conversation today with Mrs. Bayshore. She assured me right now at Peters, many of you who had children in school today might have said, oh, someone came in and did an assessment with me today. We've begun our mid-year assessments through our DIBELS. And the idea is once those are complete, we're going to sit down in a few weeks, look at the data, and build a system that includes that tiered support with all 3 teachers, as well as an enrichment group. What that looks like yet, we don't know. We have to take a look at the data. I'm not sure if the sizes will be drastically different this year than they were in the past. I do know that, as what Mr. Pyne said, because of that time that was missed at last year, the achievement gap from your 85%, your tier 1 students and your tier 2 students that need that support, it seems to be a bigger gap there. But there is a plan for enrichment, but what that looks like right now, we can't quite give it to you, but hopefully in a few weeks, again, we're going through assessments this week, next week, and then sort of going over and going through that data the following week to sort of create our middle of the year groups. And then at that time, those parents will be contacted, and we'll discuss that with both the parents. We send home our letters for our tier 2 and tier 3 students. And I'm sure that Mrs. Bayshore will reach out to those who will qualify for the enrichment. So like I said, Chris staying in for anybody else who is interested. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of insight. I didn't want you to think that, enrichment isn't part of what we're doing this year. It certainly is. But again, just it's one of those things for the long term. We made the right decision, and Mrs. Bayshore's in a place where she's going to be amazing for the next, 50 years before she retires. Missy Bowers coming in is going to be amazing for the next 50 years before she retires. But at the beginning of this year, it was just sort of one of those tricky rollovers. So hopefully, again, we'll have a plan in place, and we'll be able to share that out with parents. And
so,
I did. Oh, go ahead.
Right. I have a question about specifically the reading support, because that's something that we deal with as a family. But in years past, I feel like the kids who had like tier 2 or tier 3 support were getting this on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. And this year, they're only getting it 2 days a week. And I'll just use this week as an example. Monday was a holiday and Tuesday was an assessment day. So my group A child didn't get it at all this week. And is there a way that, especially with the increase in the live streaming of lessons and the virtual work we're doing, is there a way to increase the amount of additional help that these kids are getting? Because I can read books with my kids all day long. I mean, that's something that's been part of our life in general. Obviously, it's not quite enough for this particular kid because he's just not quite at the same place that his siblings are when it comes to reading. But I am not trained in the specific needs that he has. So yeah, sure, I can read books with him and we can do sight words. But during the time that we were full virtual and he did have these lessons with Mrs. Fry, the difference in his interaction with her and what I noticed him doing with her versus anything he's even remotely willing to do with me is like night and day. So, and I'm sure my child is not the only child that could like benefit from, like, this doesn't have to be something that you can answer now, but I'm wondering, is there a way to get these kids back to a comparable amount of assistance as they've had in previous years? Because they're getting a comparable amount of math and science and social studies and spelling. But this seems to be like almost a greater need in a sense because they're the kids who are struggling. So I don't know, maybe that's something.
And that's, Katya, that's a wonderful and very well said as well. Yeah, you're right. I'm not sure I have a specific answer. I can give you some ideas because there's things that we're working on right now. Again, we don't know what those groups will look like, but I can tell you that the concern is heard, and we're looking at ways in which we can continue to provide support. One of the things I'll share, and again, I don't want to give any details yet because I'm not sure they're there, but I want to give you my brain and how it works and what I'm looking at. I have for, a while now, we all know that, there's gaps and we want to address those gaps. And, we also want to address those to the students that need it the most. And those right now are the students who are, our tier 2 and tier 3 students, the ones that need that support. So one of the things I'm looking at, and again, just to give you some basic, I'm looking at doing basically a month-long reading initiative within Peters. The idea is that we would purchase books for students, send them home, and that very similar to how Mrs. Lafferty did that amazing seminar on setting up the routine at home and working with parents in the evening. We're looking to do likely 1 to 2 sessions with reading specialists focused specifically on reading strategies and things that parents can do with their child at home to give them that sort of, because you're a parent, you sit down, you love to read with your kids, but if they make a mistake, or do I read it to them? Do I let them make a mistake? Do I correct? It's like, what do I do? Right. So the idea is, we're going to try to provide that extra support and then bag that around this initiative where students will all get a book to read. And hopefully, we're trying to work on like specifics of, can we get an author in to do a read? It's like all these sort of like ideas I have. And hopefully, we're going to try to tag team with a couple of different groups to bring in, a number of different resources in that way. So we're also, and I'll share with you, again, not just us at the elementary school level, but district-wide administratively, we realize that, and we're looking at ways to creatively provide extra support outside of school. What that looks like right now, we're not able to share, not ready to share. But again, that's, Katya, thank you for bringing that to the group, and that, concern is noted and it's there for us as well. And we're working creatively to try to, bring extra to the families and to the parents. Great. And for Kristen, did you have any specific thing that you wanted to share on top of that? Again, I believe, I know the concern of like, where's this group that was there last year? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that? Something for us to consider?
I would hate to add more to the teacher's plate because I know but I didn't know if like there was something like when they would teach a skill, like we did maps the other week where they could have like an optional like extension activity that's like a project more so like where they could create a map like from their house to the school, or like my son has a robot, he could code it, the directions it would take to get to the school, like just something like a higher level thinking project that's optional from like the skill that they're focused on that week.
And Kristen, that's wonderful. And I'll tell you, I had this discussion today with Mrs. Bayshore, and I said, what could this look like? Because, usually these enrichment groups met every day. And, again, our focus right now is on the students with most need. So if we can meet once a week, twice a week with these students, but do something project based where we can look at what they're doing in class, give them something big. I told, and I'll tell you, I told Mrs. Bayshore, I was like, listen, if you need me to like sit with these kids once a week and go through the project and review it with them, I mean, I'm happy to jump in and be a part of it as well. Like, we're always looking and we're always trying so hard to add support to students that need it and to provide those opportunities for students who are ready for those opportunities. So again, that's all in the works, what again that looks like. But I literally use the word, how about a big project where we're like looking at giving them something to do over time. And then, so those are all sort of on the, right now, to be honest, the teachers are all focused on, okay, we're giving these assessments and let's take a look at the data and, who's going to qualify for what. And, I sat through all the in-service and the presentations on how they're giving this, because I never had to give a Dibbles assessment before. And it's pretty intense. So, it's like, so that's what they're focused on right now. But again, Mrs. Bayshore and I and Mrs. Fry and Mrs. Hegedus will sit down afterwards. We'll look at that student data. We'll have to do data meetings, sort of already lining up with our school psychologists. And, we're gonna create, those kind of things. But I think that's great. And that might be something where, Kristen, if you want to, bring something to the table and like, hey, if you've got something that you think Colson would like do really well with, shoot me an email and I'll bring it to the teacher, or shoot a teacher an email and say like, hey, you're working on this in this class. I'm going to have Colson do this. What do you think? And maybe they can give you some guidance on things that you can do and they can work with you. I think that's a great idea. The project based, and, is a first grader ready for that? Yeah, sure. I mean, he'll need some guidance, obviously. He's not going to be able to do everything himself. But, if you're willing to work with them and, sort of guide him through this where the teacher oversees it, I think that's a great way to think about it. And again, one of the creative solutions we can come up with together. So awesome. Anything else, Kristen? All right, wonderful. And again, as we come up with that plan and as you speak to, the teachers, if something jumps out at you, let us know. Awesome. And I guess the last one on our list here is, again, based on the last thing I said, the idea that we're looking at, sorry, I wasn't sure if you can hear me there. My phone was low on battery. The idea that we're looking at creative ways to, find things to do outside of school. And we wanted to just sort of bring it to the table. This is really the big discussion point, if you'd like to add. We've already taken, a lot of your ideas from the past meetings, but looking to the future, are there any, workshop topics that you believe are in need? And you can think about, whether it be within your own house, it could be within, it seems like the parents I talk to are all struggling with this. Again, we've been focusing the beginning of our year on, sort of helping and working with parents and families to manage the challenges of setting up that home routine and how to create that situation where they're in this hybrid model and the CHC one that was parenting through a pandemic and how the challenges of that. We're now switching to the instructional. Mr. Pyne, I'm not sure if you wanted to share the Eureka thing or the details of it, but we're looking to do something with that. So.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, one of the common issues or questions that comes up, or not one of, many of, tend to relate to math, and particularly this horrible word that's come out, Common Core math. Obviously, a lot of this again comes from it's so different. It's different for me. I'm an English teacher. I didn't do well with math the first time, much less the way they're learning it now. And so it took me time to understand truly why this is the way that it is. And so often parents will come and, they're concerned about like, well, why do they have to do tape diagrams? Why do they have to do these things? And we end up rushing through that explanation a lot. And we explain that it's to develop mathematical thinking skills, and the students are coming to us with a clean slate. And so we're able to develop those through a variety of strategies. Well, Mrs. DeBillio, our third grade teacher, on February 3rd from 6 to 7 p.m. is going to be running a family workshop on the Eureka Math program in particular, and the strategies and tools within there. We're calling it something, it's a working title, Demystifying Eureka Math perhaps, or Eureka Math Demystified. Ms. DeBillio is a great presenter. She does a lot of professional development within the building, and I know she's working on that. I think it's going to be a great presentation. So, Eurekafying math. There you go. So I really do encourage parents who are still trying to figure out this whole Common Core math thing, and particularly Eureka math. And I know, Peters is making that transition right now. And, our third grade students who come in, they've been making that transition as they come in. And, we thought, what a great opportunity to really spend some time with a couple of key topics here at the beginning to try and take away that shroud of mystery that I think is frustrating at times. I think it's frustrating as a parent to see something and be like, the 3 times 3 is 9. Like, stop messing with me, Timmy. And actually kind of understand why we're doing it this way, and that it's just strategies we're using to develop that. Yeah, the right way to do math. So yeah, I mean, honestly, people who know math really do typically look at it and understand math, typically look at it, and they do understand that it is mathematical thinking. So I'm throwing that out there. That is a presentation that we're already going to be doing February 3rd. But we really want to know, because right now that's something we knew we had to cover. And I want to look towards March, and I want to go out and I want to find the right person or the right people who are really the people who can come out and speak to our parents about the next topic or the other topics that type of workshop would work for.
So are there anything that, the parents and the families want to bring to the table of, hey, I think Mr. Pyne and Mr. Schnyderite, you should look at doing something with this, because I think that would really be a benefit for, the families. And if not, again, if this is something like you're not ready right now, Mr. Pyne and I are always, email, phone, a call away. So
besides the whole, reading assistance thing, which we had just kind of talked about, that would be maybe a little bit helpful. Like, there's a wall that we hit the math wall in 3rd grade, but I'm currently not dealing with a 3rd grader. I'm so glad. So we kind of got past that. 4th grade math seems to be a little bit less different per se. Like, they're long dividing kind of the same way I did. It's very exciting. But we hit this wall when it comes to a written answer to an open-ended question. I absolutely love English. I love writing. I love the structure of paragraphs and written papers. The problem is I understand this at a level of a college student, not at a 4th grade level. And so when my child who struggles with this comes to me asking me for help, I'm not exactly sure what an elementary level is supposed to be able to do, what they should be able to understand. So, and yes, I can Google, what are the requirements for a 4th grade, this or that, but it's not really, it's written in teacher terms. I'm not a teacher. To maybe give the parents a better understanding of what a child at different grade levels is supposed to be writing. When you're supposed to be giving examples from the text, how is a 4th grader supposed to be quoting a text? How should a 3rd grader be quoting a text? What are the expectations? What are they learning? Because I find that, I have found all throughout school, when a teacher was able to kind of break down writing into almost a mathematical formula, I found it a lot easier to understand. But as a parent, I don't know what this formula looks like at that grade level. And so, obviously, if I told my kid to do it like I did, the teacher's going to look at this and be like, well, your parent wrote that.
So,
hey, Katya, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, honestly, that's a great idea. I actually really appreciate it. And I feel foolish for not thinking of it, because we, even as educators over the past decade, have changed some of the ways that we instruct in writing, and have changed some of the ways that we use writing as a tool for students to show evidence of reading, all kinds of things. And that's particularly relevant as they move from 3 straight through till 6. And it moves up. So I appreciate that. It's a good idea.
Yeah, I like the idea, hitting the wall. That can apply to more than just one topic. We can look at that for ELA, math, science, social studies. It's when you come to a point, what should the students know? But that also goes back to Katya and to everybody, the idea of a standards-based report card. You're a C student, you're a B student. Rather than that, it's Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Those standards are what teachers go by to look at what students should know at different grade levels. So that might be a good one to sort of, a nice little presentation where, we can sort of go over at different grade levels, some of the standards, share the standards out with parents. I'm not sure if anybody's actually, other than some of our educators in the room here, in the meeting here, but, I'm not sure like a general parent like looks at what the standards are for ELA in second grade or in science for fifth grade. But, that's what we use to sort of create that, what should students know? So that's a great one. And Nicole, you said social outlets for kids. I'm trying to figure out exactly what you mean by that. I have an idea, but I'm not sure if I'm going to get it right.
So just in simple terms, obviously we're coming up on almost a year that most of these kids have been, I don't know, locked in the basement. No, I'm just kidding. Locked in their COVID bubbles. So, obviously some of our students are on a hybrid, but just some kind of safe structure that they can do something social. Like, so obviously I know at Sladen Elementary, they had so many ways that they could do things, little competitions by classroom, little things that they could do to kind of foster that team spirit, whether it was something that each class was doing or something as a school. So I don't know if there is anything that they can do in the virtual environment, in the hybrid environment that can kind of bring some of that team spirit. I am blessed or cursed with twins. My boys are so sick of looking at each other, looking at, mom and dad. So, to get those sometimes Zoom calls or to get that kind of social interaction, even if it's just for those few minutes at the end of class, I know for a while there, the chats were on and then they had to be turned off, for other things. But I don't know if there could be something that is organized in some way, shape, or form for a short time. Again, it might be something by classroom or something by teacher. I don't know. I think at this point, for me as a parent, my kids are dying for that socialization. And, obviously the weather is not breaking anytime soon. That couple minutes of 15 minutes, hurry, run out and ride your skateboards. Okay, get back inside now, it's freezing. I think a lot of the kids are starved for some socialization. And I know some have siblings, but I don't know. I don't know in the virtual world what we can do safely. My kids, they don't have a lot of interaction with others. So, Zoom pizza parties and Zoom birthdays. It's just, there's not a lot out there that as a parent, I feel I can safely do with my kids. So I don't know, one more time, we're leaning on the school hard. I don't know. I don't know if there's anything you guys can come up with as a school or as teachers, but maybe there's some kind of social outlet or something we can do socially for the kids. Like I said, we're coming up on almost a year. And I just think, as educators, you guys have done a wonderful job, but maybe there needs to be something socially. So just throwing that out there. I think the kids really need some downtime.
Thanks, Nicole.
So I could kind of speak to that a little bit. As the PTO, we've been racking our brains kind of all year trying to figure out things to do for the students and the families that are somehow socially interactive. We had some relatively successful trivia nights back around Thanksgiving. We had a lot of people participate in that, and everybody kind of, laughed at each other's answers. The ones over Christmas break were not a big hit. I'm not sure if it was just, people were in the break and not really motivated to get on their computers or things. But something I haven't actually brought up to the PTO yet because we're not meeting until next Sunday. But this was actually, the way I envision it might require a little bit of help through the schools anyway. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I was thinking of virtual book clubs where it's almost like, Oprah's little book club or whatever, or the library has a book club where every kid reads the same book, but you don't read the whole book. You just read maybe like a certain number of pages or a certain number of chapters every week. And then you get together on your Google Meet or your Zoom with an adult to kind of monitor the thing. And you talk about what you read and you discuss it. And who's liking the story, who's not liking the story, what do you think is going to happen? So that all the kids are involved in the same story. I feel like this could kill kind of multiple birds with one stone. You've got them reading, you're working on reading comprehension. but they're also, then you have a small group of kids who are doing the same thing and who have something to talk about with each other. And I don't know necessarily how feasible that is at like the 1st or 2nd grade level. But like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, that seems like something that, you know, they could probably participate in. And it was just kind of like a little brainchild of mine. So we haven't really like, but that might be something that the PTO could kind of do in conjunction with the elementary schools, specifically the reading teachers, to be like, hey, you know, who in this grade would like to sign up to read this book? Obviously, it's not, I mean, it's optional, so not everybody's going to do it. But yeah, it's just another thing that I kind of came up with to hopefully get these kids interacted in something.
So, I mean, it could be something really simple. And again, I don't want to put more on the teachers, but, you know, even if it was something like how you were talking about a trivia, you know, it could, again, I'm just thinking by the classroom just because it needs to be small and tangible. But I mean, it could be something as easy as, you know, if every kid submitted some kind of trivia question about themselves, something that not everybody would know about them, and they could put it in a Kahoot or something. And so literally they would play a game like, you know, do you know who has, I don't know, 9 brothers and sisters, or do you know who is an only child? I mean, I'm thinking of really just dumb things off the top of my head, but something where, and it might only be for half an hour. You know, I know the teachers are probably inundated with all kinds of stuff they have to do, but it obviously has to be something that, you know, could just be something not graded, just be something social where they could just kind of be silly. I mean, obviously I'm showing my age here, but something like a win, lose, or draw kind of game. Obviously, you know, there has to be ground rules and it needs to be appropriate, but, you know, something where there's no homework involved. It's just something kind of silly. Obviously, my background is design, but I mean, I play like a logo party with my kids when we just need to decompress and de-stress, you know, after a big exam. So I'll pull up logos or, you know, kind of show things on screen and unveil it and see who knows what that toilet paper logo looks like, or something really dumb, but just something for them to decompress. So I'm just, like I said, I don't know the right answers, and maybe you're right, PTO could be a great way to do it, but just something for the kids to do, and it could be optional, it could be in the evening, or something just by class. So again, I don't know the answer, I'm just throwing it out there. I just know that for my kids, they would definitely look to do some downtime with some of their friends from school.
If I can jump in there, we have been talking at Slatington about our quarterly rewards and what that's going to look like. And I know Mr. Pyne has been adamant that if there's something special going on, we need to do something special because the kids are missing out. So I know the teachers are looking ahead to Valentine's Day today, and on either Thursday or Friday, 5th grade is having Christmas. They're having their Christmas or winter celebration because they were upset that the kids missed it before they went out. Different teachers are doing different things. I know Mrs. DeBilio has lunch something. I'm not sure how it works. She's an all virtual teacher. So she has breakout rooms where the kids will go into breakout rooms with their friends and eat lunch with them while they're on Zoom. These are just some of the things that I've heard of, you know, that are going on. So I do know that there's a lot of talk about it. So far, school-wide, like I said, we're looking at our quarterly rewards, and we have an ongoing list going of different activities that the kids are going to be able to sign up for. But I do know that the teachers are aware of this, and they are trying to find things to do. And Mr. Pyne has been great with saying, if you need a break and you need the kids, you know, to do something fun, we're really worried about them socially and emotionally as much as we are academically. So that has been a big consideration.
I just want to say thanks, Christy, honestly, for speaking on behalf of Slatington there. And you know, I do want to, it's a priority, and it's something that, you know, we've been working on, we've been talking about, we've been trying to figure out what are the vehicles by which we can do that. And I think especially over the past month and a half, you know, I mean, so much work being done at the beginning of the year has gotten us to where we are, we're having a lot more conversations now about how do we salvage the special moments along the way in these really difficult situations. Mr. Schnyderite probably lost his, oh, there he is.
No, I thought my phone died. Hold on a second. Oh, son of a gun. I love technology. All right, can you hear me? Wonderful. That's actually a sort of a great segue because the last thing I have on the agenda, and it's not really an agenda item, just sort of looking ahead. I did contact Katya, Kristen, and I believe it was Rebecca, because they all sort of said that they were interested in discussing with Mr. Pyne and I in sort of a smaller committee meeting, school-wide positive behavior. So maybe we can, as we, in my plan for and 2 of the 3 are here tonight, ladies, is to sort of send out something tomorrow to the 3 of you to sort of find out the best times to meet, because I don't want to, I know there's, schedules are tricky, but maybe what we could do, since all 3 of you are also on the PTO, we can also sort of have a discussion amongst that about maybe some ways in which, the one thing I thought of, because school time is challenging. I feel like, the teachers they just love the kids and they're just creating all these things. But what can we do on top of that? Wednesdays in a way are sort of sacred because that's the time where they're creating the videos for that they put up every week. And it's really like every second. But I mean, let's say you wanted to do a weekly thing where like the PTO did something and like a book reading or, Mr. Pyne and I can create something. I'm going to sign us both up. Like, hey, we'll get together and at the end we'll pie Mr. Pyne in the face again, because everyone loved that so much last year. But I mean, like, if you want to do something, I think Wednesdays would be a great idea because the teachers are very busy on those days, but I'd be certainly willing to talk about some creative ideas in which, if it's something like, again, just sort of a group reading or, you talk about playing games, win, lose, or draw. There's a game, I used to play theater games all the time with my theater background, and it's like 2 truths and a lie. And, it's like, I'll record myself doing 2 truths and a lie, and anybody who shows up that can play and take a guess at what it is. We could, again, if you want to think creatively, Wednesdays are great for me. And even if PTO doesn't show up, just sort of be a part of that conversation. And then, we can sort of play around with those ideas. So again, you all know Mr. Pyne and I look forward to these meetings every month. This was a great bunch of topics. As we look ahead to the future, the same process will be in place. We'll sort of put together, an agenda based on your ideas and your suggestions. The next meeting, to be honest, I'm scared to touch my computer to open my calendar because I don't know what's going to blow up. But I sent it out earlier in the year. It should be the 2nd Tuesday in February, probably the week of the 10th or something. I can try to open it up. But that'll be. Thank you, Mr. Pyne. Luckily, your computer's not going to explode. So at this time, again, another great meeting. Thank you all for participating. If there's anybody that wants to, again, say any last words before I stop the recording. If not, I'll turn it off. And then if you wanted to talk, in smaller groups, we can. If we just want to, again, how to reach out to both Mr. Pyne and I if there's a specific concern you have that wasn't addressed tonight. All right. Without further ado, how do I turn this off? All right. Stop recording, and the meeting is officially over. Have a good night, everybody.